Yankees Files podcast. We are back. I'm Will Harris. You're Mitch Harris. Arguably the most famed and acclaimed dad take or bad take guest. I said arguably. That's no offense to anyone. And the rest of you are, of course, fans of the team that some projection systems still consider to be the best in the American League. That team is, of course, the New York Yankees. Dad, we have a ton to get into on this episode. I know you always come armed with your takes. But first, as you are the co-host today, it is customary for me to ask, how are you doing?
You know, I'm okay, Will. And as
Only
is
okay?
my habit, as is my habit, I would like to make an opening statement, if I may.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. First, for those on video, I am wearing a shirt that your sister gave me.
She did.
And for those not on video, it says "World's Okayest Dad." That was my Father's Day present one year.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to brag. Might be the world's okayest dad.
It's not every day we have the world's okayest dad on this podcast.
Second, this podcast is brought to you by Samuel F.B. Morse.
No. There you go.
No, but that was Morse code I was doing.
Oh my gosh. So now that everyone's stopped listening, what would you like to get into?
You know, I think we should talk about the New York Yankees ball club.
You do?
Yeah.
That's such a departure from what we normally do on this podcast.
I know. But before we do that, I want to welcome Steve.
Welcome, Steve.
And as we've noted in our discussions, Steve has an SRG thing working. SRL thing working.
And do you want to explain what an SRL is for our listeners?
SRL is a Seth Rogen laugh.
Steve, has anyone ever told you that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We can get into that. I'd like to hear the answer to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to talk about the New York Yankees as constituted for the 2025 Major League Baseball season.
I think you have something else you'd like to talk about too, which is the manner in which Steve and I discuss the New York Yankees and discuss any ball club. Don't you?
Yes.
I've gotten a lot of angry texts from you about how I talk about having expectations for a baseball team and things of that nature. And I think our listeners might be interested to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into that.
Okay.
I think maybe the predicate for that is talking about the club this year.
So let's talk about the club. So
avid listeners of the Yankees Files podcast will recall that before the 2024 season, you and I went through the lineup.
Yep.
Because my thesis for the 2023 season was that they had about a 4-man lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And my thesis was you ought to try to build a lineup that's
full
of help you win and full of hitters. And certainly the bottom 3 of the Yankees lineup in 2024 was not built to win.
Well, I think that's a question of baseball analysis, right? Because you would say that Anthony Volpe in the lineup, not built to win. Well, he was like a 3.5 WAR player. So how do you square those things? He's an awesome base runner. He's an awesome defender. WAR is really good at explaining how many games a team wins. I don't like that Anthony Volpe was an 80-something WRC plus hitter either, but do you have room in your model of these things for players who create value in other ways that that doesn't come through at the plate? Because I think you ought to. It's not true of every player who doesn't hit, obviously, but Anthony Volpe was a well above average player last year in spite of his offense.
Right, and I don't like the in spite of. So Anthony Volpe...
Well, Juan Soto was an in spite of player. Juan Soto was an incredibly good player last year in spite of his defense and base running. So that's an aesthetic preference.
Not aesthetic, maybe.
Well, it is aesthetic.
No.
Because what you're telling me is if Anthony Volpe was a 3.5 WAR player, but he had a 110 WRC plus, you'd prefer that to him being a 3.5 WAR player with an 85 WRC plus.
Right. And what I'm saying,
and I know that to be true about you.
what I'm saying is that's not aesthetics. That's preferring offense.
No, but if it's the same value and you just care about the composition of it, like what's the point?
The point is,
It's still run differential. Why don't you think it's the same value? What do you mean?
I don't think it is still run differential.
It is, of course it is. It's either runs scored or runs prevented.
Right. And I got to be honest with you, as on my phone here, I've got a phone. I don't have the runs prevented for old AV, but I do have his major league career WRC plus.
Do you happen to have any of his defensive stats?
I don't have a lot.
DRS.
I don't have a lot.
Outs above average. Fielding run value.
I don't have a ton of those.
You don't. You don't.
Let me scroll through. No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No, I don't have those.
I really didn't actually think so.
What's going on here?
No, nothing. You're all good.
Okay.
Please continue.
So, so I thought we could go through the lineup.
Okay.
And you could tell me I'm wrong about who I think is going to be in the lineup, and I would love to be wrong.
You're probably right.
But let's go through it because, as you know, I'm troubled.
Yep.
And so let's go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in order of quality of offensive production.
Okay.
And I'm going to just tell the listeners of the Yankees Files podcast right now that there's a little bit of an apples and oranges element to this because some of these guys are kind of new.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had to make some adjustments. And some of these guys are kind of old.
That's certainly true.
And I've had to make some adjustments. So, of course, you start off with Aaron Jeremiah Judge.
Certainly his middle name.
Last 4 years, WRC plus 186.
Is that good?
That's pretty good.
Okay.
I would take that all day, every day. Then you've got new acquisition Paul Goldschmidt, who, if he plays poorly, I'm going to call Paul Gold.
You won't be the first.
Yes. Last 4 years, WRC plus 133. Jazz Chisholm, last 4 years, WRC plus 110.
Hey, what's Jazz's WRC plus as a Yankee?
It's higher as a Yankee, but in the World Series, it was a whopping 43.
Okay, not what I asked, but okay.
Okay. And then every other player in the projected lineup is a below 100 WRC plus player.
Is that true?
Well, let's do it. Clay Bellinger, last 4 years, WRC plus 94.
What was it the last 2 years?
Well, the last 4 years, it was 94.
Okay,
That's
what
I've got.
What is it for his career?
Career higher. Last 4 years, 94.
So, all right. Want to keep you honest here?
Okay. Then Anthony Volpe.
Yep.
Major League WRC plus 84.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Dominguez, small sample size. Major League WRC plus 84. I'm trying to think of what first name I should put before Cabrera. Miguel
Orenthal, James Cabrera.
Exactly. Miguel Cabrera. Major League WRC plus 80.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And Ben Arroz Campollo, Major League WRC plus 73.
What about Austin Wells? Why isn't he on this list?
Oh, where is he?
He's the starting catcher.
Wells, last 2 years, WRC plus 100.
Okay.
So average.
All right.
So they have a whopping 3 above average players on offense.
Okay, so this leads me
unacceptable
to
me.
an extremely important question about this offense. You noted that there are a number of new guys, young players, and yet in your analysis here, you've assumed that those guys are all going to be exactly the players that they've been for the small samples of their young careers. Austin Wells was one of the unluckiest hitters in baseball last year, and he was still an above average hitter, despite the fact that his production tanked in September after he got hit by a pitch. But like, were he producing at the level of his expected stats, he'd have been like a 120 WRC plus hitter. Do you think about that at all? Do you think about the fact that Ben Rice and Vlad Guerrero Jr. had the same ex-WOBA for much of last year? Do you think about the fact that, Jason Dominguez hits the ball ridiculously hard, and the only playing time he got last year was after an extended absence following Tommy John surgery? Like, you seem very willing to say, oh, well, Cody Bellinger was really bad in 2021 and 2022. Therefore, that's the guy he's going to be in 2025, ignoring 23 and 24. But also, none of these guys who are developing and had some good peripherals last year, none of these guys are going to improve at all. Like, I'm just wondering how you think about those factors.
Sure. And I do hope that these guys will perform better than the stats that I've just laid out.
That wasn't really my question.
Okay.
My question is, how do you think about future performance as being different from past performance, or do you just assume that last year is going to be next year?
Well, it kind of depends on who you're talking about, and it kind of depends on the
for
person's
Austin
trajectory. Wells. For Austin Wells, I expect better.
Okay.
For somebody like Paul Gold, I'm worried.
Okay.
I'm worried about Chisholm, who put up a whopping 43 in the World Series. I'm worried about Volpe, who has never demonstrated that he's a good offensive player.
Can we get back to the Volpe thing? Because I was really not satisfied with your answer.
Okay.
I would also like Anthony Volpe to be a better hitter.
Yeah.
Do you just not believe that you can be a valuable player without being a good hitter?
So I think you can have a very limited number of guys who are valuable players, but not good hitters. But in today's game, I think you need offense.
I also think you need offense.
And so an offensive liability, you might be able to squeak in a couple of them, maybe one. But otherwise, you need to have hitters. And what I see here is 3 players with WRC plus above 100, and that's not acceptable.
Do you want to cop to the fact that you really kind of manipulated some samples there? Like, Paul Goldschmidt's probably a career 130 WRC plus hitter. Cody Bellinger is probably similar. Do you want to come clean about that?
Well, you know what? It's not a question of coming clean. I think my record of transparency to the audience of the Yankees Files podcast is unblemished, and I will stand by it.
Are you ready for the metaverse to judge you?
And the metaverse will judge me if I'm wrong. And by the way, I don't want to kind of crow about anything, but a lot of times we'll have these dad take or bad take episodes, and a number of people will come out and say I'm based.
That's true. It is.
Yeah. So
frequent feedback that we receive about these dad take or bad take episodes is that you're based.
That I'm based.
That's true.
So, now I've lost my train of thought a bit, but
the question was about your manipulation of sample sizes to make hitters like Cody Bellinger look bad.
Yes. Like, let me take a player.
Well, why don't we take Cody Bellinger? Because Cody Bellinger is the most egregious example of what you just did. He was awesome from 2017 to like 2020 or 2019. He was bad from then until the 2023 season started. He was then awesome for 2 seasons. And you made sure to just take his 2 worst seasons next to 2 kind of middling ones by his standards, and then say, well, if you only look at 4 years, like what gives there? It feels like you have a little bit of a narrative you're pushing. I'm going to say it. I don't think you looked very closely at what Cody Bellinger did in the last 2 years. I think you just saw, if I take this stretch, he's below average, and that serves my narrative.
I took the last 4 years for Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, Paul Gold, Jazz, Chisholm,
Mhm.
and the reason I didn't take the last 4 years for the other guys is they didn't really have a last 4 years.
They didn't.
So I took the last 4 years for guys who had a last 4 years.
Why didn't you take their careers? Cody Bellinger's younger than Aaron Judge. It's not like if you had taken Paul Goldschmidt's whole career.
Because I'm worried that these guys are definitely on the downside of their careers. You could go out and get, let me think of an MVP. Like Mickey Mantle. They could have brought in Mickey Mantle.
They could have.
Was Lou Gehrig the Iron Horse?
We're not doing
this. No. But what I'm saying is Mickey Mantle is not getting you any hits.
He's not, but Cody Bellinger is
alive.
He is younger than the Yankees' reigning MVP. He, in the last 2 years, has been on an upward trajectory as compared to the prior 2 or 3. So I'm just wondering, in the Goldschmidt scenario, I think it's fine because he is old and it's fair to believe that he's declining. He just had his worst ever season. I think it makes way more sense in the case of Goldschmidt. In the case of Bellinger, and to a lesser extent Jazz, because Jazz's career has been more stable, I just don't feel like you're painting a complete picture to say, oh, well, if you look at the last 4 years, what do you think that Cody Bellinger was awful in 21 and 22 and really good in 23 and 24 because he was doing the same thing the whole time and it just might work really well or might work really poorly? Like, I don't think you're being fair.
What just occurred to me is instead of calling Goldschmidt Gold, we could call him Old Schmidt.
Yeah, you could also do that.
We could do that.
Yep.
But look, I'll give you Cody Bellinger. You're taking one outlier and making it the centerpiece.
No, but I'm not,
criticism of my assessment.
Because my other criticism of your assessment is there are guys who you've doomed based on like 120 major league plate appearances and then said they don't count as good pieces in the lineup. Like Ben Rice, there's a very legitimate possibility that Ben Rice is the second best hitter on the Yankees, and that's a good thing.
Oh, it would be a great thing. But all I'm telling you is...
But you're telling me that Ben Rice had a 78 WRC plus or whatever last year, 72, whatever it was. You are not considering Ben Rice's plate
73.
discipline. You are not considering Ben Rice's quality of contact. You are not considering any improvements he might have made having seen major league pitching. You're doing the same thing to Austin Wells. You're doing the same thing to Jason Dominguez. And then you're saying, well, the Yankees don't have anyone in their lineup. Every team is making a bet on someone.
That's right.
Every team is.
That's
the Yankees may be making more bets than we want them to. I think we would both say they are. However, I think you're being extremely unfair to the probabilities in the bets that the Yankees are making.
Look, nobody would like it better than I would if these bets pan out.
No, that's a different point. That's a complete deflection. That is the answer to a different question. The question that I am asking is, how likely do you think it is that these bets pan out? Because in the way that you've presented this analysis, the assumption is it's not likely at all. It's 0%. Nobody gets better. The only possibility is that people get worse.
I think it's probably likely that 50% pan out and 50% don't.
Okay.
But
so even then you end up with what, like 7?
The guys who are better, the Bellingers, the Gold, may not pan out either. So I'm counting on Judge.
Yeah.
And really grudgingly, I'm actually counting on Chisholm.
Okay.
But that's about it. Though, if you told me I had to bet on a guy who's going to be an above average offensive player for the New York Yankees ball club in 2025.
Yep, 2025. Anno Domini.
I could give you Aaron Judge, and I think I would be right about that 10 times out of 10.
Yep.
And I got to be honest, the other 9 guys, I'm not sure.
So one other thing that I think it would be interesting to address here is Yankees lost Juan Soto. I know you're very unhappy about that. I know you have some opinions about that, some of which you talked about on the last Dad Take or Bad Take.
Furious about that.
Yankees lost Juan Soto.
They didn't lose Juan Soto. The Yankees didn't do what it takes to get Juan Soto.
So
They didn't lose him. They weren't like, wait a minute. Hang on a second, guys. We had Juan Soto here. Holy cow. Has anybody seen Juan Soto? They didn't lose him.
There's been some reporting that has suggested that the final round of bidding was blind and that the Yankees would offer $760 million, which on a present value basis is like $300 million more than anyone has ever made in baseball. I think it was fair for them to believe that was a good offer. What number were they supposed to write down?
800 million. Get the guy. Because if they wrote down 800 million, they'd get him. And there is no.
But how were they to know that if they wrote down 760, they weren't going to get it?
Well, they didn't.
Okay, so that's not how that works.
No, but my point is this, and I've said it on the Yankees Files podcast before, and I will say it again, and I think we're all being played for fools by the New York Yankees Baseball Club and by Hal Steinbrenner, who is not his father.
There are some good ways in which he's not his father.
Sure.
But
and like his father, he loves a calzone.
He does.
But
we have that on good authority.
We do. But the Yankees, I've said it before, and I'm not going to belabor it.
Yeah.
The Yankees are by at least a third the most valuable team in Major League Baseball. They're also not leveraged nearly the way every other team is, or every other competitive team is. 765 to the Mets versus 800 to the Yankees. Actually, 765 to the Mets is more than 800 to the Yankees relatively. So write down 800, get the guy, have Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig on your team, and instead they let him go across town. It's unconscionable. And who do they replace him with? Paul Gold?
No, they replaced him with Cody Bellinger, who has more MVPs than Juan Soto.
Yeah. So all I'm just telling the Yankees fans out there, I'm sorry.
So last year, the Yankees got something like 13 WAR, maybe 11.5 WAR out of second base, third base, left field, and Juan Soto. This year, they are projected to get more WAR out of second base, third base, left field, and center field, which is the position Aaron Judge won't play. So I'm not counting Aaron Judge in here because he's going to play right field. That's why I didn't do apples to apples on a positional basis, because then it would look even better this year. How do you think about that as you assess the offseason and the roster construction?
Who projected that? Pacoda?
I actually didn't use Pacoda for that. I used various of the Fangraphs.
I don't even know who Pacoda is. Pacoda could be like a 11-year-old kid in the basement.
It's the player empirical comparison.
Right.
Something
that was something somebody's dad gave him. Anyway, look, I want to make a point and I want to move on because I do not want to bore the listeners.
I think I asked you an interesting question.
I'm sorry. They're projected to get more WAR. And if they do, if they get more WAR out of those positions, as opposed to the combination of positions that included Juan Soto, nobody will be happier than I will, but I don't believe it.
But so you don't even believe that, because what you're saying when you say you don't believe that is you're saying you don't believe that replacing Anthony Rizzo and Alex Verdugo with legitimately good baseball players is important to this team.
I do believe it's important to this team. And Alex Verdugo, by the way, we were talking about this New York
He
Post
actually just
article.
got signed today by the Braves, but he's going to start the season in the minors. I don't think he's going to make the team ever.
We talked about this New York Post article, and I don't know if you remember the article, but Aaron Judge was like, I don't understand it. He's
such a great player.
He's so fantastic. It's like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
That's why Aaron Judge doesn't run the team.
Yeah, he shouldn't run any team ever.
Mm-hmm. Shout out Derek Jeter. Shout out Michael Jordan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think that. I just don't know that the guys that are replacing him are going to be materially enough better to offset the loss of Juan Soto. That's what I'm saying.
And that's maybe possible, but I don't know. So here's the thing. You kind of fit an archetype of a guy that we interact with on Twitter.
Right. And the guys you hate. Yes, I totally get it. I listen to the Yankees Files podcast, and everything you say about the people you don't like or the people who it's good to make mad are me.
Because the thing is, here's what I think is kind of lame about your version of being a Yankee fan. And I'm telling this to you because I love you. And I think, this is important for you to know. There's no risk involved in being the kind of fan that you are. You go, everything's going to be awful. This team is so terribly run. All these players except Aaron Judge are bad. And then you can only be pleased with the production. It's the Gin Blossoms line. If you don't expect too much from me, you might not be let down.
That's right. Hey, Jealousy.
Great song. I might be seeing the Gin Blossoms in July.
Not with their lead singer.
Nope. And they were bad the last time I saw them. It was really unfortunate. Anyway. Thinking about how funny it is that I'll have seen the Gin Blossom multiple times. Anyway. You take no risk being the kind of fan that you are. And I think it's honestly kind of cowardly because you go, everything's going to be terrible. This team is so badly run. All these players are bad. I hate watching them. They're terrible. And then they play well. And you're like, oh, thank goodness they played well. I'm so happy because I'm a Yankee fan who wants them to play well. Like, why be that way is my question. Why?
Do you know what happened to the last guy who called me cowardly?
Who was it?
He's not around anymore.
Okay.
Look.
Because the point is that type of fan does not take responsibility for the fact there were so many people in my mentions in July saying the Yankees were only going to win 75 games and they weren't going to make the playoffs and all of that. And then the Yankees won the pennant and those people were celebrating just as hard as everyone else. And I think that's lame. I think that putting nothing on the line and then saying, well, there's only upside is lame. So that's why I think what you're doing is lame.
Okay. I'll accept your criticism.
Okay.
But
is this how you've always been?
Probably, but
you were watching the 1977 Yankees and you're like, Greg Nettles is going to be awful.
Oh, I love Greg Nettles.
Because Greg Nettles was awesome.
As a matter of fact, when I was in Little League, I asked for number 9
because of Greg Nettles. Did they give it to you?
They did.
Nice.
But I also asked for a 13 and they gave me 31. Shout out.
I wonder if anyone's going to get that.
Yes. But anyway, 2 things. The first thing is, if you'll recall, and for those of you who weren't around when the New York Yankees did this, they went out and got a player called Reggie Jackson.
They did.
And that was kind of analogous to when the Yankees went out and got A-Rod.
Mm-hmm.
It was not but sort of analogous to when they went out and got George Herman Babe Ruth. They went out and paid a guy, a great player, if not the best player, to come.
Matches for George in your contacts, but none of them share their location with you in the Find People app.
You don't have Babe Ruth in your contacts?
That's so weird. I do have the Iron Horse Luke here.
And probably Jim Catfish on it as well.
Yes, exactly. But in all seriousness, they went out and got people. And the thing that I'd like to segue to is the contrast between what our beloved New York Yankees have done and the team on the other coast, the reigning World Series champions who beat the Yankees in 5 games.
Yep.
And the only game the Yankees won, of course, was a bullpen game.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
what the Dodgers have done.
Mhm.
The Dodgers didn't let their best player go. And then the
Well, Corey
Dodgers
Seager's
didn't
on the Rangers.
stock up. The
Corey
Dodgers,
Seager would be he'd be the best non-Otani player on the Dodgers. They did let their
no,
best player
that's
go.
not true.
It's absolutely
That's
true.
preposterous.
It's
That's-
100% true. They're playing Mookie Betts out of position, not just in the infield, at shortstop because they don't have Corey Seager.
So it wouldn't surprise me if they remedy that, by the way. But this is a team that went out and stocked up, that bought players, that made themselves a better team. Leave the Corey Seager piece aside.
I just wanted to I feel like we have to be fair.
Okay, that's fine. But made themselves a better team.
They did.
And if you're B-Cash, the Dodgers beat you.
Mm-hmm.
They may not beat you in the World Series. They may not win the World Series.
They may not. They probably won't.
Well, and the Yankees probably won't either.
That's correct.
And that's a fallacious argument that I think we should get into because it really bothered me.
Okay.
But if you're B-Cash, you want to be the best general manager and you want to build the best team, and you didn't. And I'm sorry, Brian Cashman.
How do you allocate blame between Brian Cashman and Hal Steinbrenner?
Well, good point. And I'm not blaming Brian Cashman if he wasn't given the resources.
Because it seems like Hal Steinbrenner intends to treat the luxury tax threshold as a hard salary cap.
Which is outrageous when you have the most valuable team in Major League Baseball. It's outrageous to take the position and to con all of your fans, or to try to snow all of your fans, or as the girls like to say, gaslight all of your fans into believing that the luxury tax hits you the same way it hits the Seattle Mariners or the Kansas City Royals or the Florida Marlins or the Tampa Bay Rays or the Oakland Athletics.
Not anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
But my point is just, that's a joke. If everybody looked at baseball properly, which is relatively, they would realize the Yankees are not doing us a service. And that's what bothers me. It's not, you're trying to paint me, because I know you guys are getting paid by the Yankees.
Yep.
You're trying to paint me as a bad fan because I'm not willing to go along with the fact that they went and got a bunch of aging players to come in to play with a bunch of untested players when they have more resources and more power and more money and are in a much better position to withstand a luxury tax hit than the Dodgers, who went and did it. So I'm sorry, but it bothers me that the Yankees aren't willing to be leaders. The Yankees aren't willing to be the best. The Yankees aren't willing to say, you know what? I'm going to invest in putting a team on the field for my fans, including listeners of this vaunted podcast, the Yankees Files podcast.
That's the one.
To put a team for my fans on this field that's the best team that I can build. And instead, they let the Dodgers beat them on that metric. Whether the Dodgers will win the World Series or not, obviously remains to be seen. As you and Steve have pointed out, the Dodgers, as the best team in baseball, will only have about a 21% chance of winning the World Series.
Yeah.
Another way to describe that chance is they will have the best chance to win the World Series. And I would like to have the best chance to win the World Series.
I would too. I'd like to have all the best players. I'd like to have the best chance to win the World Series. I'd like any team that is shaping up to be competitive with the Yankees to be rated by the Yankees and treated as a farm team.
Yes.
I think that would be awesome.
Yes.
What Steve and I have said is that we have to acknowledge the realities of the way that the Yankees operate, independent of how we feel about those operations. Because, like, sure, we could come on this podcast every week and we could say, it's so lame that the Yankees don't spend more of their however many billion-dollar enterprise value on payroll, and they should have all the best players. And it's ridiculous that Blake Snell is on the Dodgers, and it's ridiculous that Yamamoto is on the Dodgers, and it's ridiculous that Soto is on the Mets, and it's ridiculous that Corey Seager is on the Rangers, and it's ridiculous that all these players are in all these places. But it would be the same podcast every week, and it would be chasing a ghost, because we know, for better or worse, how Hal Steinbrenner wants to operate. And it is prudent for our analysis of the team to acknowledge how Hal Steinbrenner is going to operate. Otherwise, what are we doing? What are we talking about? I think it's a fair criticism. I think it's one that maybe doesn't come across on this podcast a whole ton. I think you're right to say it would be nicer if the Yankees spent more money and had better players, but what is the action to be taken from there? What do you then go do with that analysis? You just go on Fangraphs and look up the WAR leaderboard and go, wish that guy was a Yankee, wish that guy was a Yankee. Like, what do you do with that?
I guess what I'm trying to say is there's the famous like WFAN, caller who calls in and says, well, I think the Yankees should get Mike Trout.
Yeah.
And it's like, and of course, like Mike Francesa says, yeah, but who are you gonna trade for him?
Mm-hmm.
You got to have the trade bait, and it's dumb. I agree with that. But what we're looking at is a world in which another team has gone out and done what I want the Yankees to do.
Sure.
And so that's what bothers me. If no team was doing it, then you could say, well, look, Mitch or Dad or Sir,
whatever I call you,
whatever. Look, nobody does that. Everybody views the salary luxury tax is a hard cap, and that's the way baseball does it in their own collusive way.
I do think there's some collusion involved in what the Yankees are doing.
And so, sure, they could spend $1 billion more than everybody else, and they could get everybody good, but that's not reality. But when the Dodgers go out and do what I'm advocating for, that's what bothers me.
There's an extent to which that's what the Dodgers have done. There's an extent to which you're kind of exaggerating what the Dodgers have done. Like, Roki Sasaki is playing for the league minimum. Tyler Glasnow has never been a free agent. Like, there are some guys there who aren't just playing on $400 million contracts. There's the deferred money, which, again, everyone else should be taking advantage of in the same way. And the Yankees did structure Max Fried's contract in an interesting way. So, like, there are definitely things the Dodgers are doing that I would like the Yankees to do. There are also things the Dodgers are doing that the Yankees had no opportunity to do. Like, the Yankees, Austin Wells might become this, but like, the Yankees didn't develop a Will Smith who got to play for the league minimum for multiple years. The Yankees didn't have the advantage of being the incumbent to get, or, the favorite to get Roki Sasaki, who's playing for the league minimum,
And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they went out in free agency. They went out and spent and were aggressive.
So you're talking about Ohtani and Yamamoto? Because the Yankees arguably made Yamamoto a better offer than the Dodgers did.
I actually don't know that.
Yeah, they offered him like a larger AAV and better opt-outs, and he just decided he wanted to be on the Dodgers.
And that's something that you can't control. And the truth is...
So, like, who is it about? Is it about Shohei Ohtani? Is it about Blake Snell? Who's it about?
It's about a little fella named Juan Soto. But
the Dodgers don't have Juan Soto.
No, I know. But if the Yankees did what the Dodgers did, they would have Juan Soto.
Maybe. I don't know.
And look, I'm sorry. Look, I like you guys. You're trying to make the best of a bad situation, but this was the watershed moment for the Yankees. This was when the Yankees were going to either put up or shut up.
How can you argue that they did not put up in the Juan Soto situation? If it was blind bidding in the final round and they offered $760 million, how is that not putting up?
Do you know what $40 million?
But you've just conjured $800 million after the fact because you know it would have won.
I don't think when you were already talking about the highest salary that anybody had, if you beat
by
it,
hundreds of millions.
Yes. If you beat it, no one was getting $800 million. As a matter of fact, I remember when the Yankees won the ALCS and Jazz Chisholm was in the
Yeah.
locker room with Meredith Marakovitz saying, pay Juan Soto, pay Juan Soto. And she's like, we don't need to say any numbers. He's like, 700 million.
Yeah.
Well, he was actually
Joking.
very close.
And he was
actually
joking.
very
He
close.
tried to think of a ridiculously high number.
And he was actually very close.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that 800 million would have gotten it done. And I can tell you that any baseball person would have told you that 800
No,
million
but that's a
would have gotten it
ridiculous point because you only know that $800 million got it done after the fact.
No,
the question is not.
If I'm sitting here and saying, you know what, Will, $770 million would have gotten it done.
No, but
then that's ridiculous. 800 million would have outbid anybody. Everybody knows
there
it.
was no way for you to know that before, just as the fact that there was no way for you to know whether 760 would be enough or not.
Yeah. I think 800 would have been enough.
Well, of course it would have been. But the question is why, what would make you believe that 760 wouldn't be enough? Because that was an outrageous offer as compared to anything anyone had ever made.
I understand what you're saying, but the bottom line is that they lost the guy who is going to be the guy in New York for basically the next generation. And it's unconscionable. It's unconscionable.
That was an evasive answer.
Okay, I'm really not trying to be evasive. I'm doing the best I can here.
But
and then to bring in Paul Gold and Clay Bellinger and Melky Cabrera.
Yep. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the 2009 Yankees before we wrap up here.
Yes,
because
the World Series, the last team for the New York Yankees that won the World Series. And since then, teams like the Kansas City Royals, the Washington Nationals, the Texas Rangers, teams like that have won the World Series more recently than the New York Yankees.
Do you want to go through the list of teams that won the World Series between 1979 and 1995? Like, we could also do that. The Oakland Athletics, the Toronto Blue Jays, the Kansas City Royals.
Baseball was a little bit different then. Like for the Royals to win and the Yankees not is pretty outrageous. For the Nationals to win and the Yankees not.
Why couldn't you say that about
outrageous.
the Blue Jays or the Twins?
Yeah, those were actually really good teams.
Just like the Royals were when they won the World Series. This is getting out of control. I'd like to talk to you about the 2009 Yankees for the following reason.
Okay.
In the popular narrative, the 2009 Yankees are painted as a team that was built out of like vengeance. It had been far too long since they had won a World Series. They had just missed the playoffs, which is unconscionable. So what did they do? They loaded up on the best free agents available, and they put out this bulletproof lineup, and they, were the favorites in the American League, and they went and won the World Series. And they were the best team in baseball, and that's great for them. I want to talk to you about a few players in particular. The first is Robinson Cano. Robinson Cano had 0.1 WAR and like an 87 WRC plus in 2008. He was then awesome in 2009. Explain.
Look, there's no question that some things have to go right for you in order to even have the best team, much less win the World Series. You've got to have guys perform better than you expect.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, and by the way, that's the story of the modern Yankees under Joe Torre. Nobody knew that. Look at all the guys that were homegrown. They didn't go out and get Reggie Jackson.
Nope.
Every one of the great core four was a guy that nobody necessarily knew was going to be a fantastic, generational player. They did get Constantino Martinez from the Seattle Mariners.
Yep.
And Hideki Matsui from the
Yomiuri
Giants. Is that who he played for?
Yeah.
That's funny. But you do have to have things go right for you. There's no question about it. And so it wouldn't be right to say, and this is your thesis and Steve's thesis about winning the World Series, it wouldn't be right to say you can just build a World Series winning team. It's very simple. You just go out, even if you did what the Dodgers have done this year, you don't know that they're going to win the World Series. And as you point out, the odds would suggest they're probably not. But could this Yankees team have done more? Or could Yankees management have done more with this team? No question. And it may be that Cabrera, it may be that Wells, who was, I think, 100, puts up 130. And it could be that Dominguez really breaks out, as you guys have been saying. It could be that Rice, even if he gets to 100, even if he gets to 100, would be fantastic. It could be that Volpe actually learns to play offense. All of those things could happen, and those things would be great. But as you pointed out at the beginning of this Yankees Files podcast episode, those are bets, and other teams have made surer bets.
Other teams have made some surer bets at some positions.
Mm-hmm.
Clay Holmes is the Mets opening day starter.
Yeah, and the Mets pitching, I don't know what the Mets are doing with their pitching. And
Clay Holmes might be really good. I want him to be.
Yeah, but the Mets may have miscalculated, and it's really hard. I don't know how much Steve Cohen influences the actual baseball management of the team. I actually think Steve Cohen is too smart to think sort of a la Jerry Jones that he can kind of shadow general manage the team. But I don't know what the Mets are doing with their pitching, but I do know they have Juan Soto.
Mm-hmm. It's just because the whole World Series probability thing comes out of the discussion of what are the Dodgers doing. It was Bobby Osborne, shout out Bobby Osborne, my once and future coworker, asked the question of it was either the Tanner Scott contract or the Kirby Yates contract. And he said, I can't make sense of the Dodgers allocating this money to this guy and thinking that with respect to their World Series odds, it makes sense. And I think Bobby's right. And that is how you would like the Yankees to act. So putting on your front office hat, how do you make sense of that? Because the Dodgers clearly have some reason why they do it. The Yankees have some reason why they don't do it. So what do you think do you think the World Series probabilities are wrong? Do you think that the dollars the ROI calc is wrong? What do you think? Yeah.
I actually said this to you, or maybe texted this.
But it wasn't public.
Sure. I actually think I texted this to you though. Any given player is not going to materially move the needle on your World Series odds. Even a great player, much less some of these guys I've never heard of that you're talking about. And what I said to you was, if Tiger Woods had that perspective on practicing for golf, he never would be as great as he turned out to be, because it's like, if I hit 100 more balls, is that really going to materially change my chances of winning the Masters?
Well,
no. You know what?
This is fallacious in its own way.
He wanted to be the best, and he did everything possible to be the best. And guess what? He lost way more tournaments than he won. Way more. The field always had better odds than Tiger Woods did.
It did.
And so the thing that troubles me about this World Series odds argument that you and Steve are making is, of course, everybody understands it. But should you go out and build the best team or not? You should go out and build the best team.
Well, nobody's saying that you shouldn't go out and build the best team.
And the Yankees didn't do that.
The question is, on the margins, when you're spending money, how do you make sense of that? And the reason the Tiger Woods thing is fallacious for a number of reasons. The first reason is because you play the Masters competitively 25 times as a golfer of Tiger Woods' caliber. So even if you only have a 5% chance of winning the Masters and he had a far better chance, then you're going to win the Masters at some point. The second reason is there are 4 majors a year. The third reason is that Tiger Woods probably went into a number of those majors with like a 25% or better chance of winning, which would mean
not far.
Which would mean that he would win one a
Dodgers.
year, which is basically what he did. There's only one World Series every year.
Yeah, no, I get that. But
Tiger Woods stays the same guy year over year at his peak, whereas baseball rosters turn over a ton.
You can become even better.
Or even worse.
Yeah, that's right. But what I'm saying is, here are some facts that you will not dispute because you can't. One, the Dodgers did a better job in free agency this year than the Yankees did. The Dodgers built a better team on paper than the Yankees have.
Yes.
The Dodgers have a better chance of winning the World Series than the Yankees do.
Also true.
Right. And so all I'm saying, it's not rocket science. All I'm saying is I would rather the Yankees do the things the Dodgers did than the other way around. And I think you and Steve are giving the Yankees a pass that they don't deserve by saying, yeah, but what about the incremental player?
But I don't think we have. I think we've said repeatedly, and I've said it today, that I would like the Yankees to spend more money and have better players.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, then we're in agreement. This podcast is over. We're in agreement.
The reason the World Series odds thing comes up is because there is the question of what you do with the marginal player. And there is the question of who the Yankees allowed to go somewhere else that they should have brought in. And there is the question of if you can go get David Robertson for $5 million, if that makes sense or not, and how you think about that from the perspective of the front office. Those are all, to us, interesting questions.
Well, I think they're interesting questions, again, because you're looking at the Yankees, even compared to the Dodgers, which are the second most valuable franchise in baseball. You're looking at the Yankees as though they're equal to the Dodgers or equal to other teams in baseball. And
but
they're not.
Find me what is the period in history where the Yankees outspent their opponents by the gap in enterprise value? It's never happened.
It's never happened.
Not even in the George Steinbrenner era.
It has never happened. But to sit here and say, what about this incremental player or that incremental player? There's no team in baseball who could afford more to pay David Robertson $5 million than the Yankees.
Of course they could.
Right. And so they should.
But the question is, should they? The question is, why?
I just answered it. To try to have the best team you can have.
And if it turns out that you spent $5 million on nothing, then so what? Like, what's the...
Well, we should have... Who's the general manager of the Dodgers? Theo Epstein?
Yeah, it's Theo Epstein.
I don't know who the
It's Andrew Friedman.
Andrew Friedman. You should have him on because somewhere there's somebody who thinks I'm willing to spend this money. And
yeah, I think it would be really, we've
asked
that question because we think it would be interesting to know the answer.
It makes sense to me. And my point is just this. It's not hard to know who the best is. Do you want to be the best or not? And the Yankees have said, we do not want to be the best.
And how does that make you feel?
You and Steve have got a lot of good reasons why it's not completely unreasonable for the Yankees to take the position they don't want to be the best. And my position is, I don't accept that.
You know what would make me feel a lot more the way you feel?
What?
The regular season was more important.
Well, now you're like in my total sweet spot.
Because as you know, the regular season is a far better test of which baseball team is good than the postseason is.
That's right. And
make the regular season more important, and I will be 100% on your side. I will be furious every time any player who I think is better than any given player occupying a roster spot on the Yankees goes to any other team. But under the current structure of baseball, it is just incredibly hard to say, well, we're going to crucify the team for not making move A or move B, because as much as you like the credit you don't want to give to the 2015 Royals, like if the 2015 Royals can win the World Series, if the 2023 World Series can be between the Rangers and the Diamondbacks, but it's true. Like that's the reason that the Dodgers have an 80% chance of not winning the World Series.
Totally get it. But let's maybe because we should move towards wrapping this up. And I want to bring up a point that we talked about last night, but you're right that baseball, which has managed to do more stupid things than perhaps any sport you can imagine, they've had a lot of time to do it. Let's give them that. Have figured out a playoff system that's not designed to identify the best team. Brilliant baseball. And baseball just does stupid stuff. And so in a world where the premise is stupid, applying reason to the rest of it kind of doesn't make sense. The Yankees, but the Yankees are incremental spending, blah, 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 World Series odds, blah, blah, blah. The only thing you can do, in my opinion, is build the best team and see what happens. And I know who built the best team. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers. And we'll see if they win the World Series. They probably won't. The odds are they won't. But in the same way that at any given golf tournament, the odds were that Tiger Woods wouldn't win. But I want to just, because I always love to highlight the stupidity of baseball.
This is good.
What do we call it?
What do you think about the challenge system,
Yeah,
Dad?
what do we call the strike zone?
Automated balls and strikes, ABS.
This ABS thing makes me insane because what baseball has said, at least in the games where they apply it, we're going to have ABS on every pitch. So it's not like we're just doing it like you have a golden pitch, which is another thing, wouldn't put it past baseball to do. But
just talk about the golden at
yes,
bat.
I know. They have it on every pitch, and you can challenge how many pitches a game?
I forget because it resets
some number of pitches a game
and stuff. Yeah,
some number of pitches a game. And what baseball has said is the ABS prevails over the ump's call,
no matter what.
Which means that baseball believes that the ABS is more accurate than the ump. So on every pitch, baseball has the ABS.
Which is the call it believes is correct.
It knows that the ump is going to get some of those wrong. Maybe some will be challenged, and the ABS will get it right. But they have the ABS on every single pitch. Why are we allowing a fallible human? And by the way, you don't even need to go to the next step. Why are we allowing somebody who has his own ideas about what the strike zone should be to decide? Even if you just said, these guys are actually trying to apply the strike zone, which infuriates me that they don't.
Yep.
But why are you allowing a fallible human to make these calls when you have a system that works and that tells you, according to baseball, completely accurately, what's a ball and what's a strike? It doesn't make any sense. And what I was thinking about last night is maybe this is genius on baseball's part. Maybe this isn't stupid. Maybe the genius point is that they're showing it to all of us. They're showing us that they have the technology. They're showing us that the technology gets it right. They're showing us that the technology is better than a fallible human, so that everybody is going to have to say, wait a minute, we should just use this. I mean, maybe that's what they're saying. But right now, they look stupid by having a guy behind the plate calling the balls and strikes and only applying the ABS system to challenges.
So do you think maybe one solution here would be the Pope could just umpire the games?
Because he's infallible.
It's a papal infallibility
that's
joke.
Actually, when he's speaking either ex cathedra or ex cathedra. So the Pope would say, I am making this statement in my infallible capacity. It's not everything that he says is infallible. You're like, hey, Holy Father, what's the temperature outside? And he's like 65. And you're like, oh, it's 63. And the Pope's like, nope, sorry, it's 65.
People did not expect there to be a papal infallibility discussion on this podcast.
You know,
you never know what you're going to get.
The Yankees Files podcast goes a lot of places.
It does.
It does.
Well, Dad, this has been wide-ranging and stimulating, as always. You know how we wrap up this podcast.
Sure do, Will.
We ask our guests or we, the co-hosts, as you were a co-host in this situation, rate our confidence in the team on a scale of 1 to 10. And I actually have a bone to pick with you here. During my wedding reception, we recorded a video with Whipple in which we rated our confidence out of 10 the Yankees. Do you remember what your rating was?
It wasn't high. I know
it was 3.
They probably had lost the night before.
No, they had won back-to-back games in Baltimore.
Right, but they probably lost the game before that.
During just sometime?
Yes.
Yeah. So I felt like that was a little bit of a downer on such a nice evening.
Look, a lot had happened.
A lot had happened. That's true. So anyway, your confidence 1 to 10 in this team.
Taking a page out of Steve's book, I'm going to say 6.374.
Well, that's quite precise. Do you know what fraction is closest to 6.374? Well, I guess you could actually do that fraction exactly, but I want to see you kind of mess with fractions here.
Yeah. Do we really want to subject the listeners of the Yankees Files podcast to bad math?
We probably shouldn't.
No,
but,
we shouldn't. We shouldn't.
Yeah.
But
6.374, huh?
Yep.
So like, does that translate to some number of total regular season wins for you at all? Or is that just kind of how you're feeling?
This would open up an entirely new can of worms that I think the listeners of the Yankees Files podcast have no patience for at this point. But I am really, really, really worried that Pacoda, whatever 11-year-old kid that is.
I don't know why you keep saying that.
Because you always love to quote Pacoda,
I do.
which leads me to believe, and I'm not a student of all of the baseball projection systems or websites or organizations. Like you always love to quote Pacoda. And, I think we're going to find out Pacoda is like an 11-year-old kid.
So we know what Pacoda is.
We know what it's called.
No,
Do we know who it is?
It's the projection system used by Baseball Prospectus. It projects outcomes for players based on comparisons to other players in historical seasons.
I didn't ask what it do. I asked who it is.
What do you mean who it is? It's Baseball Prospectus, the magazine.
Baseball Prospectus. Are there even magazines anymore?
It's also a website.
Anyway.
Have you ever been on a website?
A website?
Like it's like Ask Jeeves.
Oh. Or like Hotbot or
exactly.
All right, go ahead. What's yours? What's your confidence? 11?
Yeah, maybe
13?
14. No, I think the appropriate place to be. The Giancarlo Stanton news will be interesting whenever we receive it.
Do we even know what's wrong with him, by the way? Every injury Giancarlo Stanton, or as I like to call him, Mike Stanton, because I knew him before.
So he has
intercostal
intracoastal waterway. He has tennis elbow in both elbows.
This makes me so mad because they shouldn't let the guy play tennis.
It's like when Aaron Boone was playing basketball, so they had to get A-Rod.
Who's the guy that hurt himself like mountain biking or dirt biking or something and then lied about he was maybe a pitcher?
So there are a few things like that. Like Yoenis Cespedes got hurt like rodeo riding.
No.
And then Madison Bumgarner was participating in rodeos under a fake name so that people wouldn't realize he was doing it. There is someone you're thinking of that is escaping
maybe
me.
for the Rangers or something.
Yeah. It's escaping me though, but you're right.
Yeah.
My favorite one is when
Somebody got
Tigers
out of bed or something.
Tigers flame-throwing reliever Joel Zumaya hurt himself playing Guitar Hero, which is awesome.
Yeah. So what's your number again?
I think like I'm in the mid sevens.
Yeah. So you're not that far from me.
Well, I'm also closer to like 8.5 than I am to you.
Okay, but you're not that far. What I'm saying is, you know, you're
I
not
have
at
concerns.
a 9. You're not at a 9.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I have concerns.
Yeah.
Well, Dad, it's been a pleasure.
No, thank you for having me. It's always great to be on the Yankees Files podcast.
Do you have any parting shots?
A couple.
Do you want to thank our sponsors?
Exactly. No, in all seriousness, good luck to Whipple. This is my first time on the Yankees Files podcast when Whipple has not been an official co-host. So good luck to him becoming a lawyer.
Yeah.
You know, I know about that kind of thing. Where's he working, by the way? What firm is he? Morgan Lewis or something?
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, okay. I know those guys.
Yeah. Shout out Rob Manfred.
Yeah.
Tough.
So good luck to him. By the way, shout out Sasso CT.
Shout out Rob Sasso at Sasso CT.
Yep.
Shout out the other Rob at Good for Rob on Twitter, who's always a huge fan of Dad Take or Bad Take.
Oh, good. Hey, thanks. Good for Rob.
Shout out any other Dad Take or Bad Take fans out there. We know you're out there. People will be glad that you've reappeared.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it. Love having you here in the Sunshine State.
Good to be here.
So a couple of parting shots.
Yeah.
The first one is that, you know, I always want to remember when we do this podcast.
Who?
The great Iron Horse Lou Gehrig was improperly struck down by a disease that bore his very name.
It did happen.
In all seriousness, I can't tell you, and maybe I'm actually being very real here. And I know Steve said that, you know, it like hurts him to think that the Yankees don't have Juan Soto. It actually hurts me. Like, I really thought there was going to be a Judge Soto tandem for some number of years.
Same.
A la Ruth Gehrig, kind of a Moiter's row.
Yep.
And it really does bother me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's troubling.
Yeah.
But remember, we're rooting for the uniform.
That's right.
Whoever they put in that uniform, we like.
Mm-hmm. Except Alex Verdugo.
Hate Alex Verdugo. Oh my goodness. And also hated Aroldis Chapman. I got to be honest with you.
He's on the Red Sox.
Good. I hope there aren't enough bad things that can happen to him.
Yeah.
So that's one parting shot. Another parting shot is just, we'll see. We watched the Yankees not score any runs last night in the split squad spring training game.
Well, they scored 9 in the game you didn't watch. So.
Right. But I watched the one where they didn't score any.
Feels like it should average out
4.5.
Yeah.
They would have won that game, I think, with 4.5 runs.
They would have lost the other one, though, which sucks.
Damn.
Same result.
So they still would have been 500, as they are.
As they are.
So really interested to see what happens this season. Really interested to see how the Yankees Files podcast evolves this season with Steve and you. And I look forward to potentially participating in another Dad Take or Bad Take. And if anyone wants to know whether I'm afraid of Steve's dad being better than me, the answer is yes.
Well, we'll probably see. We'll probably find out.
I don't want to see. I don't want to know. I don't want to find out.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's always an adventure, and it certainly was. People can find everything we do at yankeesfiles.com. You can keep up with us on Twitter. We're at Yankees Files. Podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, including with the added bonus of video on Spotify. The full video podcast also goes up on YouTube, youtube.com/@crosstownsports. Steve and I will be back similar time, different place next week to preview the season in earnest. And until then,
let's go Yankees.
Nice.